Hey everyone, back again for another video, and I came across actually something that is it's in line with what I've been talking about lately, and I think um, it's something that we should all kind of start understanding. The video is by Basic Logic, and here we go.
Death of what is being called Woke 1.0. At long last, people, even on the left, are finally admitting that the 2010s were complete insanity. Finally, we can answer questions like, what is a woman? Without having a circular definition. Finally, we can admit that putting men in combat sports against women is not wise. Men are now allowed to part their legs when they sit down, free from judgment. No more Zer Zem pronouns. No more drag queen story hours. We have the entire right celebrating, we have the left playfully reflecting on their past convictions, and we even have the LGB telling the T to be normal. Ironic. So, did we do it? Did we win the culture war? No. Actually, this is a sign of the right's defeat, something that many, including myself, warned would happen if things continued the way they were going. And then
Yeah. So for me, um, I've been kind of saying this in real life to whoever I talk to, and I've been kind of putting this on my channel slightly. Um, the biggest problem we have currently is, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't agree with um, woke 1.0 stuff that much either, but I don't believe that I should completely stop what they believe. It's just I hated the fact that they were pushing it on everyone else, which now in turn, this is where this the evolution of them now using the immigration and the third world people coming in to try to um, help push that. It's starting to backfire. So it's really now it's okay. Do we have Western values? Everyone who wants to agree that we are the West, we have Western values, and we we agree to disagree. Is pretty much what it is. Is I mean, if you break it down to the most basic words, it's agree to disagree. Don't make laws against what someone else's belief is. That's pretty much the West. Western civilization is almost kind of like being a liberalism, not being liberal, but liberalism. But whatever.
in this video, I go over why that is and the actual political drive behind Woke 1.0's death. And if you enjoyed, consider subscribing, it helps the channel. I said in one of my earliest videos that a right-wing revolution was inevitable. By right-wing here, I actually mean anti-woke. My reasoning was as follows. With the left's mass importation of peoples from the third world, who, by themselves, tend to be very hostile to woke ideology, the liberals signed their own death warrant. The woke left somehow believed that these people, known for their tribalism and religious extremism, would perfectly parrot the liberal worldview. They didn't, as should have been obvious. This means that as the third world population grows in the West and becomes a decisive voter bloc, they would turn on the woke liberals who enabled them and try to impose their own worldview, as, by the way, has already happened in several cities and states. We're in a situation where many Western European countries will become minority European within only 1 to 3 generations, with most capitals already undergoing that switch. America has just a bit longer. On screen, you're seeing some of the statistics on this, caused by a mix of low fertility among locals due to both cultural factors and economic policy, and the unrelenting immigration numbers, as well as the high fertility among foreigners due to their own distinct culture, and being the beneficiaries of the West's disastrous welfare policies. Therefore, if things continue as is, the West will be remade in the Third World's image within the coming decades. Naturally, that means there are only two broad political positions that still matter. Either A, the Third World, or B, the dissident right, who oppose their presence and the current establishment that enabled their mass importation. everything else is secondary until this is resolved. And regardless of who would win in such a situation, they will be anti-woke. Given these options, where does that leave the left? The average woke leftist has three paths laid before them. Path 1, they can stay woke. They don't recant their beliefs, they continue to push LGBT, neopronouns, feminism, etc. unapologetically. Force it in schools, at the workplace, in movies, desperately trying to spread propaganda with every institution they still control to see if their numbers can grow enough. But they won't.
Yeah. That's what I mean. So forcing. So that's why I don't like woke anything. Forcing beliefs through any kind of means, school, work, movies. Uh, I don't know, political protests, whatever. It's just not going to work.
And they'll start losing more and more to non-woke leftists or right-wingers until they become irrelevant. And when the power struggle between the dissident right and the third world really begins, they'll be the first to be gotten rid of, effectively making this option an act of self-destruction. That's always been the woke leftist specialty, so maybe they might go with it. Path 2, they become based. A niche but increasingly common option these days, a lot of woke leftists have attempted to rehabilitate themselves, dropping their pro-immigration stance and some of their more insane cultural values, and then replacing it with nationalism. The combination of their economic policies with their newfound nationalism makes them oddly and perhaps deliberately similar to certain 20th century ideologies. It's rare because so much of leftist programming is about abhorring those certain 20th century ideologies, but it does happen. Generally, these people are treated by the dissident right with suspicion, but they can't afford to be picky with their allies. So the dissident right tolerates these based leftists, despite many believing that socialist policies are still innately subversive. Nationalism, however, remains non-negotiable. The moment one of these rehabilitated leftists starts advocating for something that sounds like civic nationalism, that is the belief that a nation is defined not by its people, but rather by the state bureaucracy, they're politically exiled.
Get the hell out of here.
Path 3. They become a Woke 2.0. Woke 2.0 is a term coined in recent statements by high-profile leftist politicians, and it's being marketed as a less insane version of wokeness that puts less emphasis on cultural causes like the LGBT, while maintaining the same economic policy and pro-immigration stance. That's the main difference between the previous option and this one. The previous option is loyal to their own nation and wants to bring about their supposed socialist utopia for their own people, recognizing that unlimited immigration makes the welfare state unsustainable. Meanwhile, this option is still globalist. Effectively, it's attempting to signal to the Third World faction that the left are their allies and that they're willing to abandon the positions that the Third World doesn't like. When people saw leftists admitting the death of Woke 1.0 and calling it crazy, they thought that the right won the culture war. That is false. The Third World won the culture war, not the right. And what does the Third World faction actually want? It's varied because they're not homogenous, but they have enough aligned interests to be considered one political bloc for the time being. They want more immigration to continue so that they can continue to bring over their communities. They want more state welfare for them, more public housing, more gifts from the national treasury. After all, it's not their money they're taking to pay for these amenities, it's the locals' taxes. Their own tax contribution is often net negative. The Third World also wants to be able to enforce their own rules in their communities, free from outside interference, which is why leftist politicians placate them by having two-tiered law enforcement and judges that are significantly more lenient with them than the locals. They want to see more of their own in positions of power and authority. And lastly, they don't want to see LGBT flags or pride parades or anything of that sort, which is why leftist politicians have been so keen on no longer bringing that stuff up. The modern-day leftist campaign strategy for any place that has a large immigrant population is to simply put a foreigner.
Oh gosh, yeah. So we're gonna have Mom Donnie, and hopefully the Michigan vote doesn't go through uh, for for this round. For I don't even remember the guy's name, um, but he's running for senator in Michigan. This is what we have to stop now.
from their ethnicity as the candidate and just promise all sorts of free stuff paid for by the taxpayer. That way, they get the left-wing vote and the immigrant vote, which is usually able to win any urban election. And all it costs them is having to not bring up the principles they've been championing for half a century. But understand, for many, this was the plan all along. The leftist leaders knew this would happen when they imported the Third World. I find the alternative hard to believe, that some of the most powerful people on the planet were completely ignorant and blindsided by the Third World's values. In truth, there was no culture war in the 2010s. There was a culture feint. While we were too distracted trying to argue what a woman is, or the fact that men shouldn't be competing against them in sports, one of the largest and most consequential demographic changes in history was taking place, and people were too busy seeing it as just one of a myriad of issues. This was a war won without a fight. And notice how naturally the champions of the 2010s wokeness have abandoned their causes, the ease with which they call their former positions crazy. Leftist politicians didn't stop being woke 1.0, they never were. They simply took on the facade that would get them elected and their agenda pushed, because that's what a politician is, and their voters should have been aware. The woke crowd is no longer as relevant as it used to be, and a new demographic of voters have taken over their role as the base of leftist political support. The liberal then was just a useful stepping stone in pursuit of this outcome. Now, his job is done, and his services are no longer required.
So, I've been trying to hint at this for a while. Um, Europe and the U.S. are pretty much the only places in the world where we, well, I mean, it wasn't a permanent thing, but obviously we were the ones who um, worked or, well, had the thought pattern and then set up systems to actually create what would be considered the closest to democracy that we can have. I mean, the U.S. is a republic, but um, we created countries that allowed us to have citizens vote rather than having kings or queens or sheikhs or all these other things that could, basically, you know, royalty or um, whatever. So we created these things through, possibly hundreds of years. I mean, the United States just celebrated its 250th anniversary. And so the only way for uh, people to continue this would be to have a value set that aligns with that. And that's what Western civilization is that Western civilization developed through the a moral system that allowed us to come to where we are today. Now, the third world um, is not does not have those same thought patterns or same morals or anything along that line. So, and I, this is just theory and me thinking my thoughts, but there might be a reason why those places in the world are still desolate and undeveloped, I guess would be another way of looking at it. And why, when you move those people into Western civilization, they can't even conform to Western civilization. Not as fast as um, you know as if we were able. If I were to go to a country, I would try to uh, abide by their laws. even if I don't plan on staying there. And that's not their opinion. Their opinion is I want my group's thinking to rule the world. Let's put it that way. Why not? Because that's technically what Islamics think. That's exactly what Islamics think. Um, or Islamists, not Islamics, Islamists, because they just push their religion and that's it, and that's all what they believe, and no one else is right, and no one else is allowed to be different, and so on. And so in Western civilization, we're supposed to we accept people's differences, and that's the biggest difference, and that's where the ability the ability for us to allow other people to vote when we don't even believe in what they are voting for. Like we're counter to what we know they're going to vote for, but it doesn't matter. They're still allowed. They're still allowed to have their voice. They're still allowed to just think for themselves. And so the greatest enemy to all of us, left, right, center, doesn't matter. Um, uh, you know, doesn't matter. Gender doesn't matter. Color doesn't matter. Uh, Religion doesn't matter. Anything. Um, Western civilization is what matters to save. That's the only thing that matters to save, and that's literally just the belief that anyone of any group can decide for themselves what they want to be and how they want to be, and um, everything like that. And so what makes me really scared actually at this current moment is, um, for instance, like the far right. Um, they're more concerned. I mean, they don't like Islamists and they don't like migration into the country, but they still have the inability to overlook a lot of the left's positions, and the far lefts or the far left people have this divine hatred for people who are on the right, and people who, for instance, support the current president. And so all that stuff is like it's just a blocking or a distraction, as he put it, that you know you don't see the true enemy, and the true enemy is really the dissolution of Western civilization. That is the true enemy, and that's what I believe. Um, so I prefer to overlook many things that I disagree with, um, from the early, well, from the time when we were actually being blindsided, and with the you know don't like your neighbor thing, that they pretty much it's pretty much what they did is, um, make you not like your neighbor because they're too far right or left, and using politics as the mechanism to cover up what, um, is currently going on for, the replacement. And honestly, the biggest thing about the replacement is that, um, people with the lesser ability of thought, which, I mean, this is where I might get in trouble for saying what I'm going to say, but, it seems to be that the people from countries that have, that are, you know, third world, non-westernized, seem to have a lower, um, IQ, lower ability to think. Now, is that genetic? I don't know. Is that because of the way that because of the culture they have? So there's less broad learning. So because broad learning, obviously, the more you can learn and the broader the more you can memorize and congest and all that. That is what kind of defines your IQ because obviously you have to test it with some kind of criteria. So being able to think outside the box and all that stuff is considered high IQ or whatever. Well, but if you don't practice it, if you don't actually do it often because your society doesn't allow you to do it a lot, um, you won't be able to. So, it, but it's also been proven that the lower the IQ, um, the easier you are to control. And this is actually comes from something. I need to find a study. I'm sure there is a study, but the people with lower IQ they can be easily absorbed into easily absorbed into like the electronics and just doing doom scrolling or not really doom scrolling, but constantly being on social media and being distracted by it and being distracted is good because then you can control the person a little easier and um, because you have to to think you have to actually do something outside of just watching somebody, so you need to actually do something to actually think. And so um, in the end I think it's just maybe, and this is just a theory, I personally think that what the definition of the great replacement, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think that that the people who are actually trying to orchestrate this, be it the government or whatever, or the rich people or whatever, I think the great replacement doesn't matter on any of the things that we've been fighting over for the last, I don't know, 30 years at this point. I feel as soon as the 90s rolled around, we're the end of the 90s. Here we go. We started just having these clash. Um, they just want to make it where the people who are underneath them are easy to control. So lower IQ. That's why the schools aren't teaching much. I mean, I am disappointed every single day by my children's progress in school. I've caught myself even having to teach the teachers on, mathematics, specifically mathematics. Whoever came up with the Common Core for mathematics is just completely dumb. Um, but that's my theory. Let me know what you think, and I will catch you in the next one.